Welcome to the REN podcast. I'm Samantha Farrow, and with me is Isaiah Colton, CEO of Real Estate Nexus. Hi, Isaiah.
Hey,
It's good having you today. Our topic today is going to be on building a team, and we have our special guest. His name is Brian Curtis, and he specializes in this topic. Hi, Brian. How are you?
Samantha, good to see you. And thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us today. If you want to take a few minutes and tell our audience a little bit about yourself, go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been in real estate for approximately 20 years. It's kind of hard to believe as I say that out loud, but yeah, doing all of this for about 20 years. I've owned a brokerage. I've run a team. I've done all of that. And the last 5 or 6 years, I've really focused on coaching and building teams. And that's really where my love and passion is. And that's why I appreciate y'all having me on today, because this is kind of what I really focus on and spend the majority of my, hours every week is just helping people build teams and grow teams and just trying to be more efficient and effective about doing that.
Well, folks, if you're listening to this, he's being super humble right now. He's coached some of the top teams in the country, and he's been doing it for a long time. And he has a rock star team himself. Does over 500 transactions. So he is a very humble guy. So I just want to say, if you're listening to him, if you're listening to this, there's nobody better in the industry to hear when it's talked about growing teams. So we're excited to have you here, Ryan. For
Great.
sure.
I appreciate that. I'll try and not get my head too big.
Well, Brian, with team building, what would be one thing that comes to mind when you talk to agents and you guys talk about team building and them wanting to start a team or they have a team? What's the one thing that comes to mind with this topic?
For me, it's about beginning with the end in mind and understanding a team. It is basically leverage, but it's not necessarily an opportunity not to work. As a matter of fact, if you talk to most team leaders, they will tell you for the first 2 to 3 years, they work twice as hard as they did when they were just a single agent. And the majority of them, if they were also honest, thought about quitting a whole bunch of times. And the reason I bring that up is not to be negative, it's just to say that this is a challenge. And, a good friend of mine always says that, leaders eat last. And that's really what this is. Sometimes you're setting aside all of the things that you want, at least short term, to make sure that your team has success, to make sure that your team has systems and models and all the things that they need. And I think it's really important to understand that starting a team is not just, I'm going to give somebody some leads and cash some checks. It's a lot of leadership. It's a lot of stepping back. It's a lot of frustration. But then flip side of it, there's tons of reward that comes with that. And I believe that, when you got to work hard at something and something is challenging, that's where the real reward comes from. And that's why I love building teams, because although it's a challenge every day, it's also super rewarding, and you get to see people grow and learn it as they move forward.
Yeah, I think I like what you mentioned about, I call it leveling up. A lot of people don't level up because I think of what you're talking about is anytime that you're going through growth, you're going through a whole different series of challenges, right? And it's like climbing the mountain to get the reward at the top. Not everyone's willing to do that. And I like how you kind of set the stage with the mindset, just letting people know that that's it's a 2 to 3 year journey. What I find is anytime you level up, even when you have a team and then you're going to the next level within your team, that's kind of like it's a journey within a journey, but there's still another challenge that you go through there too. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. It's funny. There's something came to my mind when you were saying that. This is going to be a little bit nerdy, so I apologize on the front end. But basically, life creates chaos. And then what we do is we organize that chaos. And then to grow, we create chaos again. And then we organize that chaos. And then so it's constant growth. And so, one of the things I'll say to people, if you're confused, if you're frustrated, if you feel like there's chaos, you're on the right path. Stay that path, because that's what it's all about. To grow and change, you can't, your best thinking got you where you're at, whether that's a good place or a bad place. Your best thinking got you there, and you're going to have to reorganize at a higher level. And sometimes that's breaking things down so that we can get better. And, that scares the heck out of people. It scares the heck out of me. I know even today, we start adding different things and creating new challenges in that business, and it makes it grow. But, you don't always know exactly how that's going to work out. There's risk that's involved. But absolutely, it's always a challenge, and that's what makes it fun. If it was just come in every day and cash a check, that might be great, but I think it would take some of the challenge and fun out of it.
Yeah, that's very true. Very true. We'd be bored. Well, it sounds
Or
like,
mundane, like
entrepreneurs-
Groundhog's Day every day.
Entrepreneurs, we have to have chaos, right?
That's right.
What do
I
you
think
say, Isaiah? If there's no chaos, you're not growing, you're staying still.
Well, yeah, I think that you gotta. It's funny, but it's true. Like you gotta learn to live, and you gotta learn to live in that zone. Where I think Tony Robbins talks about that a lot too. He said the person that can learn to be extremely comfortable living outside of their comfort zone is the one that most likely is going to have the most success. And like I find for myself, when I've almost trained my mind to say, when I start feeling a little bit too comfortable, I've trained my mind to say, okay, whoops, because this is might be an indicator that there's something wrong here, and we need to look at and fix it. Because the truth is, it doesn't matter if you are not moving forward, you are moving backwards, period. Like if you're not getting better, you're moving backwards, because the world's moving forward. Like it doesn't care. So
Yeah. And to your point, Isaiah, if you look at, what myself, you team leaders who had a team 5, 6, 7 years ago, we're not remotely doing the same stuff today as we did back then. So even though you feel like you're at the same place, your competitors, the rest of the market has moved forward. So, and I firmly believe in that. There is no static. Static can last for maybe a day, but
Yeah.
that's about all there is to it. And I love your Tony Robbins reference. I've got a t-shirt from when I went to a Tony Robbins conference that says life begins at the end of your comfort zone. And I just love that idea. And if you're feeling uncomfortable, congratulations. That means you're growing and learning and moving forward. So that's embrace the discomfort. And if you can learn to do that, that's a real opportunity to really build something.
that's great wisdom. I think we can end the podcast right there. No, just
Awesome. I got enough free 30 minutes.
there you go. Yeah.
So you've seen a lot of common mistakes then in the real estate industry with, just giving up or changing things when they're not needed to be changed, or what would be some common mistakes you see with team building?
I would say that one of the biggest things I see is that the team leader doesn't necessarily understand P&L and profit and loss. And so they look at this and they say, well, I can get out of production really quickly. I can tell you right now that the first 3 years that I had a team, I personally outperformed that team. In other words, I had X number of agents on that team. They produced X amount and I produced Y, and Y was larger than X. And so, people ask me this all the time, how did you build the team? And there are other ways to do this, and there are smarter ways to do this. But my answer, if I had to be honest, was I worked 80 hours a week. So I spent 40 to 50 hours a week selling houses, and then another 30 to 40 hours a week building systems and, building things. But I will say there's a lot of shortcuts that I wish I would have taken. In other words, there was a lot of opportunities to steal other people's model. So, rip off and deploy is something that you hear a lot in our industry now. And I think that too many people try to invent a wheel that already exists. And you might invent the exact same wheel and it might work just as well, but maybe it took you 6 months to create that, and something you could have created in 6 hours. So, finding somebody to model your business after, it doesn't mean you have to do every single thing that they do, but understanding that there's certain rules, there's certain, facts in our business, and you're probably not going to overcome those facts. Some people try to, but at the end of the day, there are certain things that are always going to be true. And number one is you have to have money coming in to create that leverage. That would be one big mistake. I would say the other big mistake that people make is not offering enough value. And what I mean by that is, I can't have you come on my team, say, Samantha, you should come on my team. And, here's a CRM. Great. You can use that. And now go close some transactions. I'm going to take 50% of your commission. I've got to
I'd be like, nope.
But it's funny. I've talked to people on teams, and what's the value be on your team? Well, we got a REDX account. All right. That's $89 a month. And we have great training. Well, if that's worth 50% of your commission, it's not going to be worth 50% of your commission very long, because at the end of the day, we need to bring value to you. And, one of my favorite sayings is people will join your team and leave your team for the exact same reason. So if you're not bringing the most amount of value, there's always somebody else over here offering a commission split, offering a lead source, offering all these other things. the people who stay on your team, they stay for value, not necessarily for just, again, commission splits. I think is a big thing that people are trying to give away. It's the same thing with that agent who goes and sits with a listing with a seller and says, well, I'll sell the house for 4%. Well, that's great, but you know what? I could have got 6% and I could have made a lot more money and actually go on less appointments and make the same amount of money, you know? So we've got to understand our value and make sure that we're providing that to our agents.
Value your team.
Brian, would you say that a lot within those mistakes of commission splits? What I see is that teams, they try to develop a model like a big box brokerage has, or like they try to become their own version of EXP. But the problem is they don't have economies of scale. So maybe talk through some of the do's and don'ts about commission splits since you brought it up.
Sure. Well, and you look at a big box brokerage, whether that's a KW, whether that's Better Homes and Gardens, Compass, there's a million and one. And by the way, a lot of good brokerages out there. I'm not here. We're broker agnostic for the purposes of this, and I own a small independent. So, if I'm a big box brokerage, I offer you an 80% split, a 90% split. But guess what? Basically what I'm doing is allowing you to hang your license on the wall. Yeah, I'm offering you, let's use the XP because that's a pretty simple example. I'm offering you a CRM, but there's no way that I'm paying as the owner of that big box brokerage. I'm probably paying $5 a seat. I don't know what they're paying, but if I go as a small brokerage and want to offer that, I'm paying $50 to $100 a seat. Because like Isaiah said, it's economy of scales. Think about this. If I go and buy one widget from you, you'll sell it to me for $50. But if I buy 100,000 widgets, you might sell them to me for $5. So trying to compete with those big box brokerages is not a good plan. And here's the other thing. They're not offering a lot of that values that I'm talking about for a team. So for a team, I'm looking at offering leads. I'm looking at offering direct support like transaction coordinators, listing and marketing managers, the people who literally take your business and take a chunk of it away from you so that you can go out and do what you're good at. One of the beauties of a team is we can create mastery. I don't have to do all 87 different things a realtor does if I'm on a team. So I could be focused on listings. All I'm going to do is get really good at going on listing appointments and setting listing appointments. Great. I can be a buyer's agent. I can just get really good at buyer lead generation and converting buyers. But if I'm just a general real estate agent, now I got to work with buyers and sellers and marketing and transaction management. There's so many moving pieces. That's why, in my opinion, most realtors are not great at one thing. They're average at a whole bunch of things, and average at a whole bunch of things never really gets you massive success, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's really good. That's really good wisdom, because I think if you could be okay in the beginning too, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
It's when it's that there's an awkward middle there as you try to scale and you get to, you get to more than 3 agents, and now you start getting to 4, 5, 6, 7 agents, and more lead generation comes, more software comes, right? And that's when you're going to start feeling it, folks. If you don't have the right split, is once you start going past that. At least, Brian, that's what I've seen. I'm not saying there's a magic number because every market's different. Every
Sure.
Every commission's different, but there is predictable patterns that you're gonna, if you're not paying attention to your P&L, you're gonna start feeling the pain, especially if you're out of production, if you're going out of production, to Brian's point earlier, so.
Here's another big mistake people make when they're building a team who are still in production. They'll set a goal, and I'll just pick a random number, 100. I want to do 100 transactions this year. So I've got a team of 4 people and myself. And so we get to June 30th. I picked June 30th because it's halfway through the year, and we're at 30 transactions. So what does the leader do? Well, we've got to get to 100. So that means I'm going to double down on doing more transactions. And they manage to, along with their team, they get to that 100 transactions. But what happens then is, guess what? I haven't built any models. I haven't recruited more people. I haven't gotten more efficient. All I've done is worked really hard. And again, working really hard is very respectable, but it's not scalable, because that's one of the biggest problems that happens in real estate. Everybody has a capacity, but we're all going to reach it. The only way to push forward is to create leverage. And that's really what a team is. Theoretically, a team is win-win leverage. In other words, it's leverage for the agent because they get to use your systems, your models, your leads, and other things inside there, it's leverage for the team owner because now they've got more people out going on listing appointments, going on buyer appointments. But if you jump out of that leverage role and just say, I'm just going to work really hard so I get to this goal, it doesn't work. So I'll say this, if you're building a team, set 2 goals. Set a goal for your own production, which is fine, whatever that needs to be for you to feel successful and to pay the bills, get your P&L in line, and then set a separate goal for your team agents. The reason I say that is now the only way to get to this second goal for my team agents is for my team to do better. I can't come in and do the work for them. I can't be that dad that says, I'll just do your homework so you can get out of the way. And, as a dad, I've done that. It's like, oh, it's 10 o'clock at night. You didn't tell me about this project you had to do. So who's doing it at 2 o'clock in the morning? Me. Right. So don't be dad, be a leader. And, again, I would regret doing some of that stuff in hindsight with my kids, love them to death. But, that's not the best parenting skills either.
How you learn.
Yeah, you do for sure.
Yeah. I just had a flashback, actually. It just happened to me recently. Sorry, that's what that pause was.
PTSD.
With my kid. Yeah. It's like, but cool, Sam. What other questions you got for us today?
So some best practices that you would suggest to our real estate agents listening, if they're looking to build a team, what would those best practices be?
Begin with the
We kind of went over this just now, like,
yeah, but
setting goals.
begin with the end in mind. So figure out where you want to be, and that's Isaiah always talks about a 5-year North Star, and I like that idea. So where do I want to be in 5 years, 3 years, and 1 year, and then build a system to where you're going, not where you're at. I think all too often people just get really focused on where they're at. This worked really great for me as a single agent, therefore I could just take this and multiply it times 10. Well, what you don't think about is the agents that you're hiring, they may not have the same skill set that you have. You're going to have to train them up to that. So we need onboarding, we need training, we need coaching, we need consistent mentorship. And probably the biggest thing that can help you grow your team is accountability. And, my coach has said this several times, and I love this statement, is accountability is the highest form of love. And, I look at that and I say, hey, everybody who joined my team theoretically joined to be successful. And if I let them not be successful, if I let them fail, if I just ignore it when they're failing, then I'm not holding them accountable and I'm not providing the things that I promised for them. So getting people to make commitments, like there's a book called Atomic Habits, and I love that book. And one of the things that I love about it is it talks about getting 1% better. I think a lot of times agents are like, there we go. Had no idea that Isaiah had that book in front of him, but great book.
I was just going to say, I think Isaiah mentioned that book the other day.
Well, Brian, I'm glad you brought that book up, and I apologize to take you off track here. But
no, go.
There's some books that you need to read through over and over and over again, and that's just one of them, because there's so much wisdom, and it takes in building habits. It doesn't happen overnight, so that's why I keep, this is one of the books I keep around. So that's the reason why I keep this book on my desk, is because there's so much wisdom you can keep pulling out of over and over again. So anyway, I know you had a thought, Brian. I apologize.
Oh, no. So I love that book. And one of the first things they talk about in that book is, and I'm just a little bit nerdy. There's a cycling team called Sky Cycling, and they talk about them in that book. And I follow, professional cycling. It's a nerdy sport, but I do in my family. But it was so interesting to listen to their perspective on something I'd followed for probably 10 years by the time I read that book. And it was so interesting to see how much they were focused on just the minutia. And I love that. Get 1% better, get 1% better. Just imagine if you got 1% better, even a month, let alone a day. But what if you got 1% better a month? That means I'm 12% better in a year, 25% better in 2 years. I mean, it feels like a lot, but there's another great book Darren Hardy wrote, that has the same concept, the compound effect. The compound effect is about, once again, getting little small things and getting better and better and better. And that's what we have to do as team leaders. And that's what we absolutely have to do for our agents, is just help them get a little bit better. They don't have to go from being, I don't know how to make a phone call, to the best closer in the world in a day. So there's steps in between. We have to chain those events together. And I think that's a really important concept for people to understand.
So hold your team accountable to their goals. So They all achieve goals.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's an art and
Absolutely.
science in and of itself too, because there's a way to do that is the correct way to do it, and then there's a way to
Not so correct.
do that will cause people to leave your team very quick. So
Yeah.
maybe you could talk a little bit about that. How do you find the balance of accountability and transformational leadership? Which you like to talk about a little bit.
I'm sure I didn't coin this term, but I've started using it. You know, I hear things and I just pick up on them. I believe not in micromanagement, but in micro leadership. And what do I mean by that? So I am not interested in looking at your CRM every day and go, did you call this person? When did you call this? You know, all those little minutia things. First of all, I shoot myself if I had to do that every day. But second of all, you're not going to want me to do it anyway. So for me, what micro leadership is always to come back. And I love that Samantha said it, to your goals and your desires. So, you know, if you told me you wanted to close 50 transactions this year and you gave me a reason why, and we established a plan, I'm going to come back to you and say, hey, Isaiah, is it still true that you still want to close 50 transactions this year so that you can pay for your kid to go to college and that you can take that trip to Disney World that you always wanted to take, or whatever that is? And if that's true, great. And then also, you know, talking to them about what their struggles are and what their opportunities are. I feel like all too often we become, you know, scolders. I come in and go, you didn't do this and this and this and this. That is not leadership. That's management, and it's poor management. So what do you want? Is this what you want? Can I help you get there? Here's a couple of great questions to ask people. What are you willing to do? And what are you unwilling to do? So just because you're unwilling to do a thing doesn't mean you can't be successful. I can tell you, I have never door knocked,
Right.
never once in my career. And I'm not saying that there's not a lot of people who crush at door knocking, but I decided at some point in my time, I was unwilling to door knock.
Yep.
So what that means I'm going to have to make more phone calls. That means I was going to have to call FSBOs and expireds and do different things. You can make choices. And I think a lot of times people get stuck only looking at what other people are doing. And I have to do that. No, there are things that you can do. You just might have to double down on.
Yeah, I think that's really good, especially, you know, when it comes to outreach in general, right? There's whole lot of different ways, you know, to reach out and develop relationships with people. And what my biggest message when I'm talking to, you know, when I'm talking teams is whatever that plan is, and whatever you're doing, and as you're building your team, you just have to clearly define what it is, and it needs to be a formalized sales and marketing plan that you teach, train, and coach to. Because if it's not, there's a lot of fragmentation that can happen there, and confusion, and then within that, trying to find the gifts and talents of your teammates, or of the people on your team, to help with that overall execute that overall plan. I see that as a major gap in our industry, that even good teams could be great if they hyper focused on developing a system to execute a sales and marketing plan where they're working together and not separate. So
Wow, I like that.
Yep.
Have a strong foundation.
Yeah.
Oh, we went over a lot of stuff today. Like, I learned a lot. Well, Brian, 5 things that you would tell our clients to do that they can implement in not our clients, our attendants today, what they can implement in their business if they're looking to build out a team or have a team.
Step one, make sure you have the right system. And I'm going to start with system with CRM. In other words, if you don't have a CRM, if you don't have a database, you don't have a business. At best, you have a hope and a prayer. And so you absolutely have to have that. Step 2, provide value for everybody on your team. And that's going to be different values for where you're at in your journey. So, but I would always say you need to have some kind of staff that's going to take some of the things off of your agents. So in other words, the easiest hire is a transaction coordinator for me. And what I mean by that is you can either hire that person in-house, or if you sit down and do the math, sometimes it's just better to outsource that until you get into a certain number of transactions. But take those things off that agent's plate, because if they have to sit around and spend a bunch of time chasing down deals, then that's not a very good use of their time. So, you know, the CRM, give them some support with staff. don't be afraid to hold people accountable. And again, hold them accountable to what they said they would do, and then hold them accountable to minimum team standards. I would say that probably 75% of the teams that I start coaching have no standards. And that to me is crazy, because if you don't have a standard for your team, how do you know if you're succeeding or failing? I guess you can look at your P&L and see if you got money in the bank, but that is really at best a guess. So what are we doing on a daily, weekly, monthly basis? And what are the things that I have for my team to do that? Work on an onboarding system. 95% of people have garbage onboarding. They really do. And it's a train wreck. You get on the team and people are like, oh, I didn't even know that we had this. I didn't know that we had that. So one of the things I love about the way that REN is set up is there's a playbook, and it's here and here and here and here, everything to do. Doesn't mean it's not a lot of hard work. It's still a lot of hard work, but at least knowing this is the work I have to do, that's great. And then here's the last one. And I'm going to come back to something Isaiah said, you're either moving forward or you're moving backwards. So with that in mind, recruit. If you have a team of 5 people and you're crushing it, you could wake up tomorrow and all 5 of those people could leave. Now, I'm not trying to be negative about that, but I want to let you know that nobody stays forever. This isn't my parents' world where my dad worked for one company for 40 years. As a matter of fact, if you're not growing your leaders out of your business, you're not doing a very good job of leading. So you need to make sure that you're constantly bringing new life into your company, and that's recruiting.
Yeah, especially when it comes to sales professionals, right? Like, it's just how it works. So just how it works. So that's good. That's really good wisdom. Brian, I'm excited about what's coming. And, for those of you that are listening to this podcast, Brian is taking a role of head of coaching consulting for a brand new division we're opening up called REN Coaching and Consulting. And we're going to be announcing that very, very shortly, and the details of that and everything that's included with that. And so if you enjoyed this conversation and you're listening to this, okay, and you thought you got, some wisdom, imagine being able to be connected and mastermind with this gentleman on a day-to-day or weekly basis. And that's what's coming soon. That's what we're going to be rolling out soon. So really, really excited about that. And Samantha, thanks for coordinating this podcast. We really appreciate it.
Of course, I had fun. Thanks, Brian, for joining us today.
Brian, you're the man. Great wisdom as always.
Stay tuned for next week.
Yep. And re-listen to this like 52 times because you could get a lot out of this. So, all right. See you guys.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.